Hi, so this video is on Learning Objective Chapter 3, Section 2.2, Calculating the Density of a Substance. We looked at density earlier when we were looking at properties of a substance or even of a mixture. So what is density? You need to remember this formula. Density is the ratio between mass and volume, or density is mass divided by volume. When we have abbreviations for these, density has an abbreviation of a capital D, mass has an abbreviation of a lowercase m, and volume has an abbreviation of a capital V. That's actually really important. Capital M means something else, and lowercase v means something else, lowercase d means something else. So we just need to be certain that we are using the correct abbreviations. So we looked at this earlier. This is going back a few days, but is density an intensive or extensive property? Do you remember the difference between those two? So think about it for a second, press pause. Awesome. So density is an intensive value or an intensive property. That means density doesn't change with the amount of substance you have. The density of lead is always the same number at a specific temperature. Mixtures can have densities that would be different, but if we're talking about the density of a substance, that's an intensive property. It's kind of interesting because mass and volume are both extensive properties, but the ratio between the two is intensive. So we're just going to do a few problems, a few mathematical problems using that density formula here. So sample question 19, what is the density of copper if an old penny has a mass of 3.1 grams and a volume of 0.35 centimeters cubed? It says an old penny because pennies these days are actually just coated on the outside with copper, and the inside is usually, I believe, is zinc. So its density wouldn't be the same as copper. So we got a few things that we do with every single problem. Circle the do, underline the clue. What is this question asking me to find? The density. That's what I'm going to circle. What are the clues? It's mass and its volume. And then remember, every single time that we use a formula, we always write the formula again, show the numbers that are going to be plugged in, and then solve, and then check our answer for significant figures and units. So what is the formula? It is density equals mass over volume. The question's asking for density, so that can remain a D. What is the mass? 3.1 grams. We do always put the units in. What is the volume? 0.35 centimeters cubed, right? So I showed the formula, I showed the numbers plugged in, now I show the answer. I plug this number into my calculator and I get 8.9. And in terms of significant figures, that is correct, right? 3.1 has two significant figures, 0.35 has two significant figures. Therefore, my answer should have two significant figures. I also need to check my units. Division, nothing cancels, so the units are 8.9 grams per centimeters cubed. And yep, that is the unit that we will often use for density. Question 20. Again, this is the second time we're doing a density sample problem. So if you want to pause, try to do this one on your own if you feel confident, if you want to give it a try. If not, you can just continue on along with us. Okay, number 20 says 116 grams of sunflower oil is used in a recipe. The density of the oil is 0.925 grams per milliliter. What is the volume of the sunflower oil? So right there, the volume of the sunflower oil, that's what the question is asking me to find. I have the 116 grams, and then I have the density. As a reminder, when you think of grams, you need to remember that grams was measuring mass. It doesn't say mass in this problem, but I know that that's going to be mass. So again, same thing we do every time. Density equals mass over volume. Now this time I actually know the density. So 0.925 grams per milliliter equals, the mass is 116 grams, and then the volume, I don't know. So I just leave that there. And now we need to use algebra in order to solve this problem. And there's many different algebraic techniques you can use to solve. And so I'm going to let you choose whichever way you want. So you could multiply both sides by v and then divide both sides by 0.925. Anytime that I see a fraction and an equal sign, I'm always going to go the way of cross multiplication, because what I have found is that students will often, this is a very common place for students to make mistakes. And if you get rid of the fraction, the algebra comes a lot easier. So I put the density over 1, and now I'm going to cross multiply just like that. So 116 grams equals 0.925 grams per milliliter times the volume. And then this step, most students do remember that we do the opposite operation to isolate the variable. Since volume was multiplied by 0.925, I need to divide both sides by 0.925 grams per milliliter. So in that place, it will cross out, meaning the only thing on the right-hand side of my equal sign is the variable that I'm trying to solve for, is the volume. My answer, how many significant figures? 116 has 3. 0.925 has 3. So my answer should just have 3. It comes out to be 125. And then you have to figure out the units. And the units are a little trickier. I'm just going to take the units over here and show you how they work out. So there would be a gram in the numerator and a gram per milliliter in the denominator. And this is something that you've learned maybe a long time ago, but when you divide fractions, it's just like multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'm going to take my grams and then multiply by the reciprocal, times milliliters over grams. And then look what happens. Don't these grams cancel? So my answer would just be in milliliters. 125 milliliters. What a lot of students try to do is they know they're solving for volume, so they just assume that the units will work out to be milliliters, but that doesn't let you find an error. So if you have done the algebra incorrectly and you solve the problem for the units, this is something that you haven't really done before in a math class, but if you solve the problem just using the units and the units don't work out to be what you want, that means that the algebra that you've done has been incorrect. And so you would want to look back at what you've done. Okay, so 3 significant figures and the correct units.